Kate Davis was 17 years old and had a reputation for being rebellious. Her life was a series of late-night escapades, drinking, petty thefts, and run-ins with the police. The last straw came when she was caught red-handed trying to shoplift. Tired of their daughter's behavior, her parents decided that sending their adopted daughter to a convent for rehabilitation was their only chance. Kate, not believing her ears, simply scoffed, "Forget it, I'm not going there." But just a few days later, she found herself among the woods, standing before the heavy gate of an old convent, where from the very first moment, she felt the cold breath of isolation and danger. Narrow stone corridors led through dimly lit halls where time seemed to stand still. The convent was filled with dampness and the smell of old stone. Every sound, whether the rustle of footsteps or the creak of doors, echoed ominously. There was nothing superfluous here. Only cold walls, crucifixes, and the faces of saints that seemed to know more than she wanted to find out. She was placed in a small, windowless room with a hard mattress and a heavy Bible on the table. The light bulb flickered dimly, leaving her in semi-darkness, where fear took shape. Even then, Kate understood. This place was not about faith. It was about control and punishment. From the first day, Kate learned what it meant to be subjugated. The alarm went off at 5 in the morning. The first hours consisted of prayer on her knees, with no right to lift her head. Then came hard labor, cleaning the floors by hand, carrying water from the well, chopping firewood. There was no room for pity or compassion. Any mistake was punished. There will be no phones or communication with the outside world here. You belong to the Lord now, the abbess coldly stated. The day before, one of the girls, Lizzie, had tried to call her family. She was caught, and the punishment was swift. She was dragged outside and made to stand barefoot in the snow all night. When Kate didn't see Lizzie at breakfast the next day, anxiety crept in. Kate had no intention of submitting. On the second day, she deliberately left her work unfinished, wanting to test how far they would go. However, the response came quicker than she expected. One of the nuns, a tall, burly woman with cold eyes, caught her. "You must not yet understand where you are," she hissed, and before Kate could dodge, a sharp slap rang out in the silence of the corridor. The blow was so strong that it knocked her against the wall. Pain ignited in her eyes, and her jaw went numb from the impact. Here, disobedience is not forgiven. Next time, you'll end up in the basement. At that moment, Kate felt true fear. Her pride and rebellion shattered against the cold reality of this place. She realized that only those who submitted could survive. The basement with its heavy iron doors was the greatest mystery of the convent. From there, dull moans and screams often echoed, making the girls tremble at night. The guards would bring in offenders, and then the doors would slam shut with a dull thud. What happened inside was anyone's guess. But when the girls were returned, they never spoke again, as if something in them had been irreparably broken. Night fell. A dead silence hung over the convent. Kate lay on her hard bed, trying to distract herself from her thoughts. But she realized she wouldn't be able to sleep. Shadows from the dim light of the bulb mingled with the fears that had grown inside her. What happens behind those iron doors? The thought of those doors wouldn't leave her mind. Now every whisper, every breath of air seemed like a hint that something worse lurked within. Her thoughts tore her apart, to escape or to submit. But suddenly, this dilemma was interrupted by a dull thud from the corridor. She froze as she heard something heavy being dragged across the floor. The sound resembled the rustling of a bag or a rug. Kate slowly got up and pressed against the door of her room, straining to hear the sounds outside. They grew closer, accompanied by the muffled panting of two men. They were carrying something. Kate cracked her door open just a few inches and gasped in horror. In the dim light of the corridor, she saw two guards dragging two rolled-up rugs. One of them unraveled slightly, and she caught a glimpse of something that froze her blood. It was Lizzie's pale hand, hanging off the edge of the rug. Her fingers were blue and twisted, and there were marks on her wrist from a rope. Kate covered her mouth to stifle a scream. Her heart raced, and her throat dried up from fear. They dragged the rugs further down the corridor, heading toward the basement with those same iron doors. Then she realized this was not just a punitive isolation chamber. This was a place from which no one emerged. Her thoughts were interrupted by heavy footsteps. A figure was approaching. The abbess walked down the corridor, her shadow stretching like a predatory beast, devouring everything in its path. Kate watched with bated breath as two rugs, each wrapped around a body, disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. Her fingers trembled, and the air felt heavy as lead. Her body instinctively sensed danger, every cell screaming, "Run!" But before she could even step away from the door, she heard the familiar rhythmic sound of shoes tapping against the stone floor. The Mother Superior. Kate froze. Her half-open door stood out in the dark hallway, and the shadow of the Mother Superior was approaching swiftly. "Damn, she's coming this way." Kate quickly, silently slipped back into her room and fell onto her bed, barely managing to cover herself with a thin blanket. Her breathing was ragged, but she forced herself to lie still. Her heart pounded so loudly it felt like it echoed throughout the room. The door creaked open with a heavy groan. Kate lay still, watching from the corner of her eye as the Mother Superior slowly stepped inside, shrouded in darkness. Her face was dimly illuminated by the light from the hallway, revealing an icy calm that made everything feel even more terrifying. She approached the bed, leaning over the girl. "I hope you didn't see anything, dear." The Mother Superior's voice was soft, almost tender, but it carried an underlying menace that sent chills down Kate's spine. Kate couldn't bring herself to blink. She lay there as if she were unaware of everything happening around her. The Mother Superior leaned in closer, and Kate felt her cold breath near her ear. "Because if you did?" The whisper grew lower, sending an icy shiver through Kate. "You'll be carried out just like that." She straightened up, contentedly adjusting her habit, and added with an almost maternal smile, "I hope you're a smart girl." She stared into Kate's face for a few more seconds, as if checking whether Kate understood she had been given a final warning. Then she slowly turned and left the room, leaving the door barely ajar. Kate lay in the half-light, afraid to even move. Her heart still raced as if it were ready to burst from her chest. And then she realized, if she didn't find a way to escape, next time it would be her wrapped up in a rug. By morning, Kate was jolted awake by the sharp sound of a bell. They were roused for work long before dawn. Under the cold gaze of the caretaker standing by the door, the girls hurriedly got dressed. Their faces were blank, like thoughtless masks revealing neither fear nor hope. Kate felt her nerves stretch tight, like a string ready to snap. Breakfast consisted of watered-down milk and a few pieces of stale bread. Kate saw the girl beside her. It was Sophie. Sophie reached out to Kate as if she wanted to give her something. It was a piece of chocolate she had secretly bartered from one of the girls. "It's not quite breakfast, but it's better than the nun's food," she joked. Kate merely nodded, but that was enough for Sophie to feel that it mattered for both of them to have someone by their side. The girls quickly bonded. Both rebels, they found support and strength in each other that helped them endure the hell of monastic life. Sophie turned out to be not just brave. She had long devised an escape plan and finally decided it was time to act. When Kate learned about this plan, her heart raced. "I won't leave you here," Sophie said, seeing hope flash in Kate's eyes. "You're coming with me, but we need to act quickly and quietly because there won't be a second chance." The right wing of the monastery was almost abandoned due to renovation work, and the nuns rarely ventured there. But to get there, they had to pass a guard in the hallway. Sophie had long noticed that this man had a sweet tooth. Despite the ban on any indulgent food, he sometimes secretly devoured chocolate bars that he procured from unknown sources. "The moment he shoves another candy into his mouth, we'll slip into the hallway," Sophie explained. "After that, it's up to us. We'll just need to figure out how to avoid the guards in the courtyard. But we'll only have a few minutes." Kate listened, a mix of fear and adrenaline awakening inside her. This was dangerous, but she knew there was no other way out. That night, they set their plan in motion. The guard, as Sophie had predicted, hid in the shadows of the hallway and greedily unwrapped a chocolate bar. At that moment, the girls quietly slipped past him and into the right wing. As they walked down the dimly lit corridor, past piles of debris and crumbling walls, Kate suddenly stopped. "Are you sure you know where to go?" she whispered, but Sophie just smiled. "Trust me." They reached the door leading to the inner courtyard. The problem was that 2 guards were stationed there, patrolling the area from time to time. Kate felt dizzy at the thought of what would happen if they got caught. Sophie suddenly pressed Kate against the wall, a cold glint appearing in her eyes. "You know, Kate, not everyone can escape," she whispered. "Sometimes you have to leave someone behind to get out of here alive." To Kate's horror, Sophie abruptly shoved her forward, right into the guard's view. They grabbed Kate, while Sophie managed to slip back into the shadows. Here's the translation into American English. The basement door creaked and closed behind Kate. She was forcibly thrown into a torture room. She noticed an unexpectedly new, clean bed with white sheets in the corner, the only thing that seemed out of place in the grim setting. It was then that the headmistress emerged from the shadows, carrying a lantern. "Welcome, Kate. You've almost made it." Her voice was soft, but there was something genuinely horrifying about it. "Your friend Sophie? She's helping us find those who think they can escape." Kate felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. Sophie had been working with them all along. Her trust had been betrayed, and now she was trapped. The headmistress pointed cautiously at the new bed. "Don't you understand? This isn't just a punishment room. This is your new home. From now on, you'll be here for a long time." Despair washed over Kate. The headmistress's shadow stretched towards her again, and she realized there was no chance for rescue in this place. Suddenly, the basement door swung open again, and Sophie was thrown into the room. She fell to the floor beside Kate, shocked and bewildered. The headmistress laughed, looking at both of them. "Sophie, you were so foolish to think that if you betrayed Kate, you could truly be free. Now you're both stuck here together. No one is escaping." Kate and Sophie exchanged glances as they sat on the floor. Kate struggled to contain her anger towards her friend, but deep down, she understood why Sophie had acted the way she did. No one wanted to be trapped. Now all their hopes of escape were buried. The girls sat on the cold floor, listening to every sound. The basement door opened again, and 2 men entered. They were dressed in dark clothing, with smug grins on their faces. One held a bottle of something alcoholic, while the other glanced at the girls as if assessing them. "Well, girls, ready for the party?" one of them asked, grinning ominously. Overcome with horror, Kate felt her heart race. The situation was becoming increasingly threatening. She glanced at Sophie, whose jaw trembled with fear. They both understood that this was not just a visit. It was part of their new, terrifying life. One of the men approached Sophie, leaning in so close that she could smell his unpleasant odor. He grabbed her face as if measuring it, and that was the last straw. "Get away from me!" she screamed, slapping him across the face. "I'm not going to be part of this." Kate felt a surge of approval, but at the same time, fear gripped her. The man, seemingly unfazed, only smiled while Sophie's face flushed with anger and humiliation. "Sweetheart, it's too late. You're both here not to leave us alone," he commented nonchalantly, a phrase that would be impossible to forget. At the same time, Kate watched the scene unfold, realizing that these men hadn't come just for entertainment. Her heart sank in despair as one of them grabbed Sophie, shoving her to the side. "Let's take care of her. It's our night," he said, moving towards the girl who was now in his merciless grip. Filled with horror, Kate realized there was no place for rescue in this room. Fear for Sophie overwhelmed her, but she felt powerless to do anything. She watched as the man held Sophie in a way that made it impossible for her to move freely, and the realization of what was happening consumed her mind. Sophie tried to fight back, but she seemed so helpless in that situation. Kate felt her heart wrenching with fear and despair. She knew that with every moment Sophie was alone with these men, their control over the situation only intensified. When they were finished, they simply stood up and left, anger evident on their faces. Kate rushed to Sophie, pulling her close, but heavy footsteps echoed outside the basement door. The door creaked open, and two women entered the room. The head nun and her mentor, Martha. Their presence filled the air with cold and ruthless authority. Here's the translation in a natural American English style. The head nun stood with her arms crossed over her chest, and there wasn't a trace of compassion in her eyes. "You know why we're here," the head nun said sternly. Her words felt like a sentence. The mentor, nervously fidgeting with her sleeves, glanced at Sophie, who sat on the floor, trembling and unable to lift her head. "Because of you, we lost money," the nun said coldly. "You caused a scene, resisted, and the guests were unhappy. Some refused to pay, and one even threatened us with trouble." Sophie raised her head. Her eyes were full of tears, but she didn't say a word. Kate hugged her tighter, trying to shield her from the horror, but she felt her strength slipping away. The nun slowly stepped closer, revealing a gun in her hand. "You know what happens to those who let us down." Martha, standing next to the nun, was shaking as she held the weapon. She had been tasked with carrying out the punishment, but fear and confusion had paralyzed her. "Fire!" the nun hissed. Martha raised the gun and aimed it at Sophie, but her hand was visibly trembling. She took an uncertain shot. The bullet struck the wall, whizzing past Sophie's head. Sophie screamed and fell to the floor, while Kate froze in terror. "You're pathetic, as always," the nun sneered, snatching the gun from Martha's hands. Without hesitation, she raised the weapon and pulled the trigger with no emotion. The shot shattered the silence. The bullet struck Sophie in the chest. She gasped for breath, collapsing into Kate's arms, and fell still. Kate stood frozen, holding her dead friend's body. Her mind refused to accept what had just happened. She pressed Sophie to her, as if that could bring her back to life. Tears slowly filled her eyes, and a dull groan of pain escaped her chest. "Get rid of this," the nun ordered coldly. "It has to be clean by the time I return." She tossed the gun onto the floor like it was just a tool, and without looking back, she left the room. Martha, seeing Kate spiral into despair, paused for a moment. Her eyes glazed over as she looked at Sophie's lifeless body and the devastated Kate sobbing beside it. "You need to calm down," Martha whispered. "If you break, they'll come for you next." Kate trembled, unable to muster the strength to respond. "I understand how you feel right now," Martha said quietly, leaning in closer. "I was once in your shoes. I lost everything I had, and I lost a child." Kate raised her tear-filled eyes, trying to comprehend what the mentor was saying. "I got pregnant by one of them," Martha whispered. "They made me give birth here in the basement as punishment. I knew they didn't kill the baby. They left her at the shelter." She paused, wiping her eyes, then looked at Kate with unusual resolve. "I have a plan," she said, "but I need your help. In the head nun's office, there are all the documents about my child, her name, where she is now. I need to find those papers. But I can't go there alone. There's security, and the passage is too narrow for me." She touched Kate's shoulder. "If you help me get those documents, I'll help you escape from here. It's your only chance." Kate was still reeling from shock but understood there was no other way out. She nodded, hoping that this desperate plan would save her life. "I'll show you the way," Martha said, carefully getting up. "But you only have an hour. After that, the head nun will be back here. If you don't make it in time, they'll kill us both." Martha pushed aside a heavy panel on the wall, revealing the entrance to a narrow tunnel. "It leads straight to the office. Be careful. The space is very tight, and it's dark. Take your phone and snap pictures of the documents." Kate took the phone and crawled into the passage. The dampness and confinement made every movement painful. She felt the cold concrete pressing against her shoulders, her heart pounding in her chest as if it might burst free. Every minute felt like an eternity, but finally, Kate emerged into the nun's office. Luckily, no one was there. Everyone was still at lunch. She dashed to the desk, frantically searching for Martha's papers. And there it was, the document she had been looking for. The date, the name, and a photo of the child. Kate froze when she saw the face in the picture. Her heart skipped a beat. She was staring at her own childhood photo. The document read, Caitlin Martinez, born in the monastery basement. Mother, Martha Anderson. Gathering the remnants of her strength, she snapped a photo of the documents with her phone. Her mind struggled to process what she saw. This was not just information, it turned her entire life upside down. She sat there, silently gasping for air as a storm began in her consciousness. How? Why had she never known? She read and reread what was written, her true identity, her real origins, which had never been revealed to her. But as she tried to make sense of it all, the office door swung open abruptly. The nun entered, her black robes gliding across the floor like a shadow carrying a threat. Kate felt the blood drain from her face. "What are you doing here, little one?" the nun asked, her voice cold as steel slicing through the air. The nun closed the door behind her, and Kate felt a desperate urge to flee wedged in her chest. She knew she wouldn't make it out before the nun could pounce on her. Every second stretched into eternity. Kate tried to stand, but her legs felt glued to the floor. I was just looking for," she stammered, barely able to find the words as panic muddled her thoughts. "You weren't looking for anything," the nun interrupted, stepping closer. "You don't belong here." Kate knew she should never have entered this place. She had no plan left. All that remained was fear. She looked at the nun, feeling the cold hand of dread grip her heart. "I know about your plans," the nun continued, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Did you think you could outsmart the system? No, dear, it's not that simple." Kate began to back away, but the nun blocked her path, her shadow darkening the exit like an abyss ready to swallow her whole. "You weren't meant to know the truth," she whispered, pressing further into Kate's fear. "And now you'll have to pay for it." Kate closed her eyes, feeling everything she feared coalesce in one place, and that place was right now. She knew the nun wouldn't leave her any chances. "You will pay for your curiosity," the nun added, her voice colder than before. Suddenly, the door swung open again. Guards stormed into the office to carry out the nun's orders, and Kate realized her time was up. All that remained for her was despair and a will to survive. But now, even as she tried to escape, she knew she wouldn't be able to. The nun, standing before her, was ready for the final step, one that Kate couldn't even imagine the outcome of. But suddenly, a thought flashed in Kate's mind about Martha's words. Could it be that she had another chance? If the mentor didn't know her true last name, did that mean others couldn't link her to this horrific reality? This might be her last chance. If she could hurry, if she could escape this dreadful place, she could start anew. Kate, gathering all her resolve, jumped into the narrow passage behind the cabinet in the office. She heard the nun scream after her, but the passage was too tight for them to squeeze through. Footsteps and shouts echoed behind her. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the monastery, and all the doors slammed shut with a deafening crash. "Find her!" the nun shouted, her voice filled with rage. Kate made her way down to the basement, where Martha was already waiting for her. The girl handed her a phone with documents and an old childhood photo. "This is me. You, Martha, are my mom." At first, Martha couldn't believe it. Her face twisted in shock. "This can't be," Martha exclaimed, snatching the photo. "But, is this you? I never imagined it could be you." Kate looked into her mother's tear-filled eyes. "Quick, follow me," Martha said, grabbing Kate's hand. Escape from the monastery. They found an underground passage leading to an old elevator hidden behind rusty doors. Martha pressed the button, and the elevator descended with a grinding noise that was almost deafening. "This will take us to the kitchen," Martha explained, listening intently for any sounds beyond the doors. When the elevator doors opened, they found themselves in an empty kitchen. From here, they could exit to the courtyard, but the way was blocked by guards. "We need to find another way out," Kate said, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. In the kitchen, they discovered another passage leading to a dark hallway. Along the way, Martha recounted how long she had been searching for Kate. "I always felt you were close," she confessed. "But I never knew you were in the monastery." "It's still terrifying," Kate replied. "I've been all alone for so long." Suddenly, as they passed one of the doors, Martha stopped, her face turning pale. I just realized why I couldn't find you. Your last name." She felt the pain in her heart flare up again. "I never thought you could be my daughter." Kate stared at her mother, witnessing the emotions overwhelming her. "Mom, time isn't on our side," Kate cried out. "We need to run." Martha, filled with emotions, nodded and quickly led Kate through the corridors. As they emerged into the courtyard, Kate and Martha saw that guards with dogs were already waiting on the monastery grounds. The nun, with a fierce smile, commanded the dogs. "Sick 'em." The dogs lunged into action. Kate and Martha started to run, but suddenly Martha stopped as the dogs approached them. They began to sniff Martha, rubbing against her legs. "They know me," Martha said, her voice filled with hope. But the nun, seeing nothing was happening, aimed her gun at Kate. "No!" Martha screamed, and in an instant, she jumped in front of Kate. The bullet hit her right in the lung. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were my daughter sooner," Martha barely whispered, struggling to breathe. "Now run through the woods." Kate, sobbing, watched her mother die before her eyes. Suddenly, the nun aimed her gun at Kate again and fired. Kate managed to duck just in time. She glanced to the right. The bullet struck a tree. Then, to her surprise, she saw the gates wide open. The girl dashed deep into the woods, running for her life, crying uncontrollably. Every step was filled with pain, but deep down, she understood it was now or never. Suddenly, Kate spotted a road. A small car was approaching, and she ran into the middle of the road, raising her hands to stop it. The driver, surprised, came to a halt. "Please, to the train station," Kate shouted, frantic and tense. "They're chasing me." The man nodded, and Kate jumped into the car, feeling her heart race with desperation. Behind them, the guards and dogs surged into pursuit, but Kate was already safe in the car speeding toward an unknown direction. The guards shouted to each other, trying to stop the vehicle, but it vanished around the bend. As Kate thanked the driver and stepped out at the station, he said, "Don't thank me. Thank God. It's a miracle I even passed by here. He spoke to my heart to take that road, and now I see why." Kate was overcome with a sense of liberation and gratitude. She looked back, feeling free at last. The board displayed the date, December 24th, 2015. Kate gasped as she realized she had spent 2 years in the monastery. Now she was 19, fully grown. The time spent in that horrific place felt like an eternity. Kate paused, bowed her head, and whispered, "God, thank you for helping me escape that hell. Thank you for my mom, and happy birthday to you." These words filled her with newfound hope. She had not only escaped but also found a part of herself she thought was lost. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And remember, religion isn't always a genuine faith. Sometimes it hides horrifying secrets.